Lawyers, what is a detail that your client failed to bring up to you that completely lost you the case?
My house was robbed. In addition to all the stuff the thief took, he also stole a bunch of my suits and all of my neckties. I had a big collection, like 100 or so. However, the thief left fingerprints on a hard plastic box that I kept spare change in. Fast forward 3 months, the thief is caught in the act of robbing another house in the same neighborhood, same detectives on my case and this new theft. They fingerprint the guy and the fingerprints match the ones from my house. At the thief's arraignment, I see him stroll in wearing my suit and my tie. I tell the district attorney, he says there's really no way to prove it. However, the tie he chose to wear was a one-of-kind street map of San Francisco, and I still had all the documentation to prove it. The district attorney's eyes widen, and he informs the judge. The judge has the thief placed under arrest again for possession of stolen property. The thief's lawyer was dumbfounded. It was a nice end to a rough situation. Story 2. Minor traffic cases can be the worst for this, believe it or not, because they are short and simple and oftentimes the client isn't there. So if you get blindsided by something critical, there's often no chance to consult with them to turn things around. I had a simple speeding case, 70 mph in a 55. No big deal. If she does a driving improvement course, the court will usually dismiss or reduce those, since her driving record wasn't bad. When I showed up for her, I found out that she had been driving 70 up an unplowed snow lane to get around all the others' cars traveling in the lane that had been plowed because they were driving too slow. I didn't know it was even possible to drive 70 on fresh snow. The officer stated he'd already cut her a break by not writing the ticket for reckless driving, and the judge politely agreed he didn't feel comfortable reducing it under those circumstances. When I called her up after court to confirm, she did, claimed she'd just forgotten to mention it. Now maybe I've lived too much of my life in the South, but that just boggles my mind as a detail you'd forget when hiring a lawyer for that incident. I would have told her in advance that hiring us was a waste of money, not to mention the hassle of taking an 8-hour class, and she should probably just go ahead and pay this one. I legitimately do that all the time during consults, give my honest assessment if the case is even worth doing, and so by omitting that detail she harmed herself for no reason. At least she took it well and didn't get defensive. Story 3. Not my client, but the son of the opposing party, and presumably the party himself, lied about being blind to make himself seem more sympathetic as a witness. We didn't know either until he took the witness box. Their counsel asked him to take the oath, and he picked the card up and read it. That was the cherry on top of a series of ridiculous events. The judge dismissed the whole thing in our client's favor shortly after. I was a trainee at the time, but my boss, who was in her late 60s then, said it was the most ridiculous case she'd ever handled. Story 4. I wasn't a lawyer in this role, but was a law clerk. This was a typical divorce case. This particular jury trial was about splitting assets and who would get what. It was a long, drawn-out case that took about 5 days. Right before the closing arguments, the attorneys wanted to talk to the judge. It seems as though a couple of days prior, the couple decided to get back together, and instead of telling the judge and their lawyers, they just kept it a secret. We heard 4 days of evidence, arguments, brought in experts such as land assessors, financial planning people, and the like. And they were back together. One of the attorneys asked to be dismissed from the case immediately and walked out the courtroom. The judge had to dismiss the jury, and the couple was adamant that they didn't think that them getting back together was a detail any of their attorneys needed to know. Story 5. I'm a public defender in an area with lots of meth use. Meth makes most people talk. A lot. So I can't tell you how many clients forget to mention that they got to the jail still high and called their mom, girlfriend, buddy on the recorded jail phone, and not only confessed to the crime, but also brainstormed whatever alibi or version of events I'm relying on to defend them. Calls to a lawyer are privileged and generally go through dedicated lines that aren't recorded, depending on the facility. Calls to family, friends, etc. through the normal phones are not privileged, are generally recorded, and can be used in court. There are usually printed signs near the phones and a recorded warning before each call that this is the case. Story 6. I am actually a lawyer, but I was only watching this trial, not participating. So the case was that Woman A had hit Woman B in the head with a heavy beer pint at a bar, and Woman B got pretty serious injuries. The defense claimed that Woman A had not hit anyone with the pint, but instead had just thrown the pint into a random direction, and it happened to hit B in the head, thus it was an accident and not a battery. Well, the prosecution had a CCTV tape from the bar, and it was shown at the trial, and the tape clearly showed in high definition as A walked behind B and smashed the pint to her head so hard that the pint shattered on impact. I looked at the defense lawyer and his jaw literally almost hit the table. The prosecutor also noticed this and asked it something along, throne, A. And the defense lawyer said that due to technical difficulties, he couldn't get the CCTV tape open on his computer when he was reviewing the evidence. Woman A was found guilty. So yeah, I was completely dumbfounded. Story 7, guy was claiming theft of multiple items but mainly a ring. Things weren't adding up, so my dad and the insurance company's lawyer decided to do a depot of him. Guy shows up and is doing the depot when my dad notices the guy is wearing the exact ring he's claiming was stolen. My dad slides a note to the lawyer telling him the guy's wearing the ring. Once the note got slid, the guy realized what happened and put his hands under the table and took the ring off. They asked him to stand up and lo and behold, the ring fell to the ground. Story 8. My father is a judge. I remember him talking about a case where a woman was suing for a severe back injury that she said was preventing her from working and taking care of her kids and so on. In the middle of the trial, a pen rolled off the table and she is bending over trying to reach it from her chair, but pen was too far away, so she stands up and bends over and picks it up and goes back to her seat as if nothing is out of the ordinary. My dad is just looking at her and she snaps at my dad and goes, "What are you staring at?" My dad asked her if she was okay and her response was that she was fine. Her attorney leaned over and said something to her and she then loudly started complaining about her back and how much her back hurt, but no one believed her. Lol. Story 8. This one ended my marriage. My husband lost his job in the title mortgage business, applied for unemployment, got denied. I decide to help him with his appeal hearing. I asked him multiple times before the hearing, "Is there anything you did that caused them fire you?" He says no, absolutely not. They fired him out of nowhere. Hearing day comes. He testifies under oath that he did nothing wrong, was a good employee, no issues. Up on cross-examination, the other attorney pulls out documents from one of his real estate closings, documents he forged and backdated. Had to admit he perjured himself. Needless to say, he didn't get unemployment and he didn't sleep at home that night. Story 9. I had a client who, despite being a large man, had been domestically abused by his much smaller wife throughout their marriage. After the divorce, she turned her anger on their son. He ran away one day to live with his dad and we filed to restrict her parenting time and for a permanent modification. At the permanent hearing, she denied being abusive to the child or my client in front of the child, said she never threatened anyone ever, and that she never made disparaging remarks about my client in front of their son. What she didn't know, and therefore hadn't told her attorney, is that he had recorded multiple instances of her abuse. So I called my client back up for rebuttal and played an audio recording of her screaming at my client, threatening to break his face in and calling him a loser, all while the child could be heard in the background begging her to stop. I looked over at the other attorney and she had her face in her hands. We won.